Welcome to Believe in Celtics. I'm your host, Warren Shaw. Alongside me, as always, is the great Gary Washburn. We're your hosts and resources for everything Celtics this season and all seasons. Gary, good to see you, man. We got a little, post All-Star drip going on. We're back into the flow of the regular season here, the stretch run, as we like to call it. But as always, we'd like to know how you're doing, man. How's everything been?
Everything's good. Yeah. Season's starting to kick into the fourth gear, I'd say. Out of maybe 5 gears and 20 plus games left and some entertaining basketball, obviously, last night in LA. Who would have thunk? I think
I went to bed on that game, thinking it was one way and then it went the other way.
It was like they were up 21. The Clippers up 21 in the third, and I was fighting sleep, and I was flipping the channels, and then all of a sudden it was like, I think, down to 7, and then that's where I watched like the last 4 minutes or whatever, where it was like, okay, the Lakers gonna pull this out, and all of a sudden LeBron just has one of those great moments of his career, one of those signature moments where he just takes everything out of your hands and turns into Superman. And I think it was fun to watch. I think it was fun for the young folks to see, that LeBron. It's not as often as it used to be, but man, when he's right, he is right.
I think that's expertly and poignantly put, right? I think even Darvin Ham continues to be, LeBron's, biggest fans, exactly saying just that. He whipped out the cape, as you alluded to, and a great, I think, comeback win, for the Lakers there in the season that has not quite gone the way that they would have expected, but Clippers without Paul George, without, I think another starter in the lineup there. So the fact that they were up that many and had it pretty much in hand and let it get away is a problem. But the fact that they were able to play well, at least for 3 quarters, without 2 starters is, an indication of how talented that Clippers team can ultimately be. Boston knows very well, as the Clippers came into Boston and spanked them a couple of weeks ago. So really interesting stuff going out there in the Western Conference, but as always, what it is with Boston, the Eastern Conference is their home, and some stuff going on here as well, too. Good and bad. We can maybe touch on that here, maybe towards a little part of the show, I think, in some ways, because we always talk about, I live in the South Florida area, so seeing the Heat play better is a positive thing in terms of Boston. May not have to face them in the first round, but the aspect of that they're playing better, and it could be problematic, with that infamous Heat culture. But before we get into all that, we got to do our plugs. Make sure you follow me on Shaw Sports NBA on X. Follow Gary at G Washburn Globe. Make sure you're always reading Gary's stuff on thebostonglobe.com. Follow Believe Network and Believe Sports on social media as well. And give our show a 5-star rating if you'd be so kind, on whatever your listening platform is. So before we get into, what we're just talking about, maybe even towards the end here in terms of how the Eastern Conference is starting to flow out a little bit, news has been kind of circulating. Draymond Green was talking a little bit about goalposts moving and things like that too. And I think the Celtics organization, and obviously, Gary, you're very close to it. You can tell us if this is true, but I think there's been a push now, especially post All-Star, to be like, yo, why not Jayson Tatum for MVP? Why is he not getting more consideration for that? But before we get into the specific case for Tatum, I want to get your thoughts, Gary, because you do have a vote. And one of the things that voters, media, fans alike, even players say, well, there's no true damn criteria. It's all very subjective. So from your standpoint, a person who has a vote, what's your subjective criteria now for the MVP outside of the 65 games, which is the only thing that I guess is the mandate here now? But what have you been looking at in years past, and what you've been looking for this year to cast your vote?
That's a loaded question, Warren, because now it's 11 years that I was the only one that voted for Carmelo, and I was the one, unfortunately, in terms of I didn't know, but denied LeBron being the unanimous MVP in 2013, and everybody wants to know still what made me vote for Carmelo, and my reasoning was he was he carried that team to the playoffs. He carried that team to the second round. That team in 2013 won the Atlantic Division for the first time in 19 years. They had not won it since 94. They didn't even win it in 99 when they went to the finals, and they made that surprising run. He was just dynamic that year, led the league in scoring. I think he was like 29, 7, and 6 that year. And even though LeBron had a historic year himself, I felt like he was indispensable to the Knicks. And when you're looking at MVPs, the question is, do you vote for the best player in the best team, or do you vote for the player who's indispensable to his team to where they would collapse or likely fall out of the playoffs if not for this individual player? And so I think it varies. It all depends on how you look at it, Warren. For me, this is an interesting year. Like, is it for me? It's not numbers based as much. Numbers are great.
Sure.
It's clutch play, what you do against the top opponents in the league, teams win and loss record. Teams win and loss record last year. Did you carry them to 10 to 12? Did you help them to get 12 or 15 more wins? And so I don't have a real, like, I'm just starting to kind of pare it down. Obviously it seems to be down with Embiid out because of the 65 game limit. You can maybe choose a guy out of LA. You can maybe say Kawhi is a long shot. You could say Luka, obviously, Jokic, Tatum, SGA in Oklahoma City, who's having a fantastic year. And you can probably throw in Anthony Edwards. And if you want to, you could say Giannis if you think that he's had a tremendous season. But obviously with the Bucks not being as good as people thought, I think he's kind of fallen out of that race. So I think there's 5 to 6 candidates. And I just think you have to look at overall statistics, but also how you do in the big games, how much the team has improved from years, this year to last year. The Celtics won, I think, 57 last year. If they win 65, that's a market improvement. That's an 8-game improvement. You look at the importance of that player on the team. If that's the case, maybe you can vote for Jokic almost every year. But you also look at the standings. You also look at the supporting cast. Is he playing with 2 to 3 other guys who are all NBA caliber? So that might hurt Tatum, where it's, he's got a team with Jalen and Drew Holiday and Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis as one of the best teams in the league. So it all depends on how you really look at it. For me, I take all things into consideration in terms of wins, losses, performance in big games, overall numbers, overall improvement from that one year to another for the particular player, and supporting cast. So to me, that's what I look at. I don't really have a choice right now in terms of I've pared it down this guy. I really haven't looked deeply, besides the 30-point games. I haven't looked deeply at SGA's numbers, right? I haven't looked and said, man, that dude, but I think he deserves all the consideration. And Jokic, I haven't looked at numbers yet. I haven't really looked at that yet. But Tatum, I think there's this kind of groundswell of support of, well, why in the hell is he not a candidate, a top 3 to 4 candidate, if he's the best player in the best team? And I think he's taken a step forward, even though his numbers do not reflect it. I think if you're going to look at pure numbers, Jayson doesn't have a 53-point game. He's got a couple of 40s in there, I think, this year. Maybe would that help his case? I'm sure if he shows out and I think, we could talk about that more in the next 5 games. Basically 5 playoff teams you're playing in the next 8 days. All national TV games. I think TNT picked up the Cleveland game. So all that, Turner on TNT on Tuesday and Thursday, that ABC Saturday night game at Phoenix on next Saturday, ESPN on Friday, ABC on Sunday. So it is going to be the Celtics on the big stage. I think, can Tatum help his case by putting up some big games, leading his team to wins? Yes. I think that will impact the voters, and I think that people will get a chance to look, because I think people are kind of taking the Celtics for granted because they're winning so much that it's whatever. And then Jason's become kind of a new old name, right? SGA, even though I want to say they're not that much in part in age, right? SGA is 23, 24. Tatum's 25. We view SGA as a new face, even though He's been in the league 4 or 5 years now. Same with Anthony. Anthony, who's a little younger, right? Anthony Edwards, I think, is 23. So we're viewing them as new guys. Tatum, because the Celtics have competed so much, and so for so long, he is not a new name anymore. And obviously, the fact that he's on a lot of commercials and all that, probably, helps and hurts him in a sense. Because I think people are like, well, Jayson, prove it in the playoffs, man. We're tired of seeing this same old act, and then you guys lose to the Heat. So for me, I think he's got some stuff to prove, but I think he's in the race, and I think he should be in the race.
I think, again, that point of can you win it within the stretch of games, or as you're alluding to, against some of the tougher opponents, right? So riding, what is it, like 8-game winning streak here right now. And now 5 games against 5 teams who could literally give them the business. They could feasibly go 0-5 in this stretch with the way with some of these teams playing. You're catching Golden State now back on an upswing again too. Some demons that need to be exercised, I think, for Boston in that game coming up. And for Tatum and Brown, I think specifically as well too. Like they've got to learn to play well. I think we all remember last year where it was teetering, and the conversation MVP always comes up, and well, is it this guy or that guy? Embiid just lambasted Jokic, I think, on a national TV game. And there was people like that was done. And I was like, damn, he won the MVP with 1 game. But it's just kind of to show like how their narratives can kind of swing. And Embiid, I think, was deserving and very well deserving to at least be in the conversation last year and ultimately win it. It's fine. But it's just so wild to kind of see that. But I think with this stretch of games here, Tatum can probably, as you allude to, make his best case and best push. But I don't know if when you have a second all-star like that in Jaylen Brown, and you have Porzingis, and you have what Derek White is doing, everybody sees what Derek White is doing on top of it now too. Derek White's no longer like this underrated guy. People are like, yo, that guy can hoop. They were talking about him being on the all-star. Drew now was going to be a lock, if you will, for the Olympic team. So there's a lot of great support that's there. It's interesting though, because on the flip side, the case for Giannis is interesting. But he has another Hall of Famer alongside him in Dame. But Giannis is having a really great season. Jokic continues to probably be the best overall player in basketball on a night-to-night basis, right? And then it was interesting you brought up Kawhi, because I see what the Clippers are doing, and I think the case for him is maybe being bolstered by like, oh, dude, this guy's friggin' finally healthy again. And I don't know if that would be enough for me, because he's literally flanked by 2 future Hall of Famers, in PG and James Harden. And I think that's where Tatum's like, he has
3.
Oh, and Russ, my bad.
Yeah, like nobody talks about
disrespect.
Russ, and I know Russ comes off the bench, but that team's got 4 Hall of Famers.
Yeah. Disrespect. Yeah, you caught me disrespect there. So shout out to Russ. But I think in the case of Tatum, they have really good players, but Jaylen Brown's not necessarily a Hall of Famer. He might be on the path, but he's not there. Right? Porzingis certainly not, very good player, but not in that ilk. So I think it's just really interesting to kind of see that is the collective whole of the Celtics parts going to impact his overall case, because he's also not having his best statistical season. But I think one thing that does go in his favor is the fact that he does play both ways. And I don't think Tatum's defense gets talked about enough, in general terms, if you will, and then sometimes on the biggest stage and taking some of the biggest challenges. And that's why I think this next 5-game stretch can be as important as any of his career when it comes to this individual award. Because I remember hearing him on, I think on the JJ Redick podcast, not whenever it was. And it's just like, yeah, man, I think he does feel like the narrative moves for him, or whatever the case of being. He's like, hey, I had a pretty good year, but it doesn't really get talked about. But similar, not Luka-like, but similar, a whole heap of praise was what put upon them. Remember, like the second year Luka was here, Luka has an MVP chance. And then, Kevin Durant, once the Celtics beat the Nets that year, that guy's going to be an MVP one day. So we haven't necessarily seen him take the proverbial steps, but now this seems to be the year in terms of the team really being at the forefront. And now the narrative, like you said, can the best player on the best team, should that be the MVP? And I think it's just again, the narrative switches and changes every single year. Of everything I've said right there, where do you think, and you don't have to rank the other guys, but is Tatum at least top 5 in MVP voting in your consideration?
Yeah, I think he's top 5. And going back, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is 4 months younger than Tatum. So there's not years here. Like,
Wow.
like he is 4 months younger than Tatum, but we view Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as this up and comer, right? Because he's a 2-time All-Star now, second year, just made it. But he is in his sixth year in the league. Tatum's in his seventh, so they are 4 months apart. So, whatever reason, that's how we view Shai as like this young up and comer. It's his time, but he's literally 25, about to turn 26, like Jayson. So, Jayson's in the top 5. And I think because of the Celtics and because of their success, you're going to have to pick one of those guys as an MVP candidate. Now, obviously, Jayson is the best one. And I just think his numbers are deceiving, Warren. He's averaging 27 a game. Okay, that's 3 points fewer than last year, but he's also taking 2 fewer shots per game.
Mm-hmm.
He's shooting 47.5% from the field, tied for his career high as a rookie. Now, he took twice as many shots this year as than he did as a rookie year. So it's a little, deceiving, but he did obviously had a standout rookie year, right? 14 points a game. So he had he played, he has started for the Celtics since he got off the bus from Duke. So he had a full rookie year, but his highest shooting percentage since his rookie year, 36.1 from 3. He's been better. He was better in his first 4 years from 3, but he tailed off the past 2 at 35.3, 35%. Now he's up to 36.1%. Free throw shooting, it's kind of been an adventure for him a little bit, even though he's still 82%. Sometimes he misses some that he probably should make.
Yeah.
But rebounds, 8.5 compared to 8.8 last year. Assists, career high 4.9. Steals about 1 a game, which is his career average. So turnovers, 2.5, his lowest since his 3rd year. So he's taking care of the basketball. He's shooting pretty well from 3, not great, not elite, but he can knock them down. You wouldn't leave him alone. Career high in shooting percentage. So if you look at the overall numbers, Warren, he deserves consideration. Defensive rating 110. He's had better defensive ratings over the years. 106 a couple of years, but 110 is what it was about what he was last year. His offensive ratings higher, career high 121. Obviously, points per possession with him on the floor. If you don't know what offensive rating, not you, but the fans, the listeners don't know what offensive rating means. So, he is having a nice season. But as I said, there is a groundswell, I think, a push to get Luka MVP because he's so damn good and he's so crafty. And I think the NBA community loves Luka. So I think that there's some, and then the Mavericks are better this year. I think if they're the 6 or 7 seed, it might be hard, but if they push up to 4, and we'll see them how they do over the next couple of weeks. And I know they come to Boston on Friday. To me, I think there's a groundswell of support. I think there might be some Jokic fatigue, even though he didn't win it last year. He won 2 in a row.
Right.
And Gilgeous-Alexander, the question is, will fans, will the voters, is what he's doing, is that enough? Is that enough? Do you see him as a franchise player? I think yes. But I think with a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, tremendous player, but probably needs to get some more national TV games. We don't see Oklahoma.
Do you think there could be a legitimate chance, just because of the shiny and new aspect, that SGA could win this thing over Tatum?
He could.
That's
Oklahoma City's a half game back of Minnesota, number 1. They've won 6 in a row. He's leading the league in scoring. I think when you're talking about if you discount Embiid, I think Shai's in that category. I think he's 2nd or 3rd, if not the tops. And Oklahoma City's number 1 seed. I mean, or tied for number 1. Won 6 in a row. So
but they have listen, I don't want to, speak blasphemously here, right? But they have one of the better supporting casts in the leagues as well, too.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they didn't have two all-stars, if you will, but Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, J-Dub, those are two hoopers. those guys can play. And I think, that OKC team is like they play to Shai's strength, and I'm not knocking Shai in any capacity, but I'm hard pressed to feel like he has the nod over Tatum in this when he has just as good as not maybe just as good a supporting cast, but he's similarly skilled supporting cast. And SGA is maybe doing a little bit more lifting because that's what they need to do for offensively. Tatum can score 32 a night, 33 a night if he really needed to, but that's just not where Boston is. So I think that's why it's such an interesting case scenario, but narratives do run this league, and we all know that.
Yeah. So going back to the scoring, the qualifiers, Luka's leading the league with 34 points a game, 34-4, and Shai is second. The question is, I think it's perception, Warren, because do you view Oklahoma City as like a real support? Like, they're essentially they were great under when Durant and Westbrook were there, right? They went to a finals. They went to a Western Conference Finals. They came close. They couldn't pull it out. They lost that 3-1 lead to the Warriors, and that was kind of the beginning of the end for that era. And then Russ and Paul George got into the playoffs. I think they lost, and then there was then when they traded for Chris Paul, they even got into the playoffs in the bubble. But after that, they went through this period of they traded Paul George. They traded Chris Paul. They dumped all their parts. They decided to completely start from scratch. And now they've got all these draft picks: Josh Giddey, J-Dub, the other Jalen Williams, Holmgren. All these guys are homegrown. The question is, do you view those guys do you view them as a great team or a great young team? And so I think Gilgeous-Alexander might benefit from being like, man, he has led those group of young guys, because they don't have no old guy. Like, they just got Gordon Hayward. Gordon's not what he once was. Gordon's 33 years old. They don't have a lot of adults in the room, as they would say. Like, they're a bunch of kids, and they play hard. What's the kid? The rookie Cason Wallace has played well. He's an all rookie team kind of guy. They have just done so. If you view Shai as the leader of this really young crew and they're overachieving, because I think, would you say that they're overachieving this year?
Yeah, I think I would.
Yeah. I'd say that too, right? Like, I think people, when they were in the play-in last year, they lost. So they've gone all the way from the play-in, 8th, 9th seed, because I think they were in the initial play-in, all the way to 1 or 2. That's going to help Shai. And the fact that other guys are taking a step forward. I think there's an argument between him and Tatum, obviously. It all depends on how you look at it. But if you're looking at dubs, if you're looking at who's led their team to wins, you got to give Shai just as much respect as Tatum, because Shai's got a bunch of kids, and I think the perception is Oklahoma City is a team that's probably was a year or two away, and they have fast-tracked that. Because now we don't know what's going to happen in the playoffs, right? They could go up against the Warriors in that 8-1, get the jitters, lose in 7, right? Would we be surprised if they played a Dallas, a Lakers, Oklahoma City, Golden State, even a New Orleans, and they're just like, they're just a deer in headlights because it's their first time in the big stage, home court advantage. But we're talking about regular season here. You got to give SGA and those guys credit for taking that step forward.
Yeah,
and I think that's going to count just as much in support as the Celtics, because the Celtics people, you got Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, former All-Star, Kristaps Porzingis should have been probably an All-Star. Derek White, one of the rising players, not young anymore, but one of the rising players in the league. Probably he's one of the most improved players in the league over the last couple of years. So if you look at that, you're probably going to give Shai more support because you're probably saying that supporting cast in Boston is better than Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and I think that point about just, again, what they've done from what they expected, because I was like, hey, I think we all saw the writing on the wall. I was like, no, that's a playoff team. I didn't think they'd be in the play-in. I thought they'd be 5.
Yeah,
5, maybe
from 8 to 5. That'd have been that's a fantastic season. That's them coming back, because I think the kind of the consensus in Oklahoma City was about them was like, okay, when y'all gonna finally turn all these picks into, like, now they still have 28 in their first round picks over the next few years, but when are you gonna turn all these assets into winning on the floor? Like, and I'm sure. I mean, last year they made the play-in. I think they lost to Minnesota, a competitive game. So that was like a little bit of a taste, because honestly, Warren, it was only, in the bubble, they were in the playoffs, right? With Chris Paul, a young SGA, a first-year SGA there. It was the first year there. Danilo Gallinari. They had some vets, but they decided to go bad, as some teams, teams are trying to do now. The Detroits, the Washingtons, like, okay, no more middling here. The getting into the play-in or sneaking in is not going to work. We got to go bad. And they've obviously done well, right? And I think that there was this impatience of 3 years of like, okay, what's up in Oklahoma City? Are they really trying here? And they like, no, we're trying now. And they get Gordon Hayward at the deadline. They got all these picks. They got all these guys. Now they got to pay them all eventually, right? Yeah. They paid SGA, but they got to pay Holmgren. They got to pay Jay Will. All these guys are going. It's going to be a situation like 15 years ago where they got to decide who gets to go and who gets to stay. And they made the decision of sending James Harden out, and that, we can discuss whether that was the right call to keep Serge Ibaka over James Harden, but they did. But now I think people are like, whoa. And I just think now to give. Now, here's another thing. He would be the third Thunder player to win an MVP. So is that a little too many, right? Is that people like, okay, like we didn't, okay, we've acknowledged they're a good team, a good franchise, like we're good, wait till next year. So it's no right answer. It really isn't. Luka, 34 a game. Ridiculous, like just the stuff he's been able to do. But Dallas is now a 7th seed, even though they're playing better and they're going to be a beast to play against when the Celtics get them on Friday. They're going to be it's going to be a hard game for the Celtics. Dallas is still only 7th in the now they're 6 games from 3rd, but they're still 7th in the West. They're a playing team right now.
Yeah, they've won 8 out of 10. So
yeah, they're 9. Yeah, even though, as I said, as great as Luka is, they're 9. They're 9 games over. They're 34-25. They're only 18-13 at home. They're about the same on the road as they are at home. So it's easy to say, well, Luka, that's great, but you've carried this team, but y'all still ain't an elite team in the West. So that could count against Luka.
Well, let's close the conversation here on that aspect. I think, again, with Tatum, there's a lot of competition, and this can be a very contentious year for that MVP, as you alluded to, because you can make cases, and really cases for and against everybody we mentioned here, for everything we've even already kind of discussed, including, Tatum himself, but SGA, Luka, Jokic, Giannis, all those names, there's something that you can say, yeah, but maybe not. And I think the safest pick is probably Jokic, but like you said, there's potentially voter fatigue there. Before we close out here, we're obviously inching up here against the March 1st, deadline for players who are on other teams to be an S&B bought out. Doesn't mean so if you're not on a team currently, you can still join and be eligible for the playoffs. But we're seeing some names, some interesting, some not so much. Mike Muscala got let go, or is about to get let go more recently. Again, former Celtic. Patty Mills got let go, I think, today as we're recording. Marcus Morris just got let go, former Celtic. So there could be some intrigue there, potentially. Don't really know. Do you think the Celtics are going to do anything with this last roster spot? I know you've been talking about converting, Kita into that final spot. But with the arrival of Tillman, don't really know how realistic that's going to be. Do they feel like they still need that front court depth? What are you hearing from that side from Boston in terms of that last roster spot, or they're just going to let it ride?
Interesting. Okay, so I looked at Marcus Morris and thought, damn, like they could use him. But remember, folks, as we talked about a few podcasts ago, if any player makes over the mid-level exception of $12 million, they're ineligible to sign a buyout contract with the Boston Celtics because the Celtics are in the second apron. Marcus Morris, in the final year of his deal, is making $17.1 million. He is not eligible to come to Boston. He liked playing in Boston. He was a good Celtic. I did not want to see him go. I enjoyed covering him. He was a dog when they had him and Crowder and Isaiah. They had a bunch of dogs in that team, tough guys. Amir Johnson. It was fun to cover that team, right? The young, when it was young Tatum and young Brown, but you cannot scratch out Marcus Morris off your list. Patty Mills is somebody that the question is, do you think he has anything left in the tank? He can still, he's a shooter. He's not going to defend anybody. He's going to come off the bench and potentially light it up from three in one game. He's going to win, he's 35 now. He could win you maybe a game or hit a key three or supplements the bench unit. But in his numbers this year in Atlanta were not terrible. He only played 19 games. He shot 38% from three this year, 36 last year in Brooklyn. He hasn't had a lot of run. He played a couple of years ago, 81 games. That was his last time as a kind of a full-time player. He shot 40% from three, so he could still stroke it. Yeah. Okay, the question is, can he get open? He's lost a step. He's not the kind of the guy he was in San Antonio, where he was just terrorizing teams because he was getting open and that sliver of space he was knocking down. He shot 41% from three 6-7 years ago, 39% in 18-19. So he was a premium three-point shooter. Could he be somebody that the Celtics can bring off the bench and just say, okay, Patty, get us some buckets? I've thought that they've needed that kind of guy. But is it Patty Mills? And remember, March 1st is the day that the deadline, so it might not get any better. I don't know how many guys are going to get bought out tomorrow, but tomorrow is the deadline. So you got to Muscala. I don't think Muscala was very good with the Celtics. Right. I just think, why would you bring him back? You got Xavier Tillman. You don't need that big. You got Keita. Keita, I think, has got some games left to play. Mills would be interesting. Now you could say, well, he's a lot like Peyton Pritchard. True. But could you throw him in as the two guy? I don't think he's a point guard as much. Or you can go super small and play him and Peyton. But could you put him in as a two with a Derek White and have him just run the floor, get open? Former teammate of Derek White, I want to believe in San Antonio. So that's something to think about, right? Now, the buyout market, Warren, as we know, you're not signing LeBron. I'm not talking about LeBron, but you're not signing a player who's going to come on and be a starter and come in and just dominate. Most of these guys are on their last leg. If you look at Gordon Hayward in Oklahoma City, I watched the game against Houston. It was on TNT, and there he is playing with 6 minutes left and the Thunder up by 18. Right, here's Gordon Hayward coming in. That's what it's going to be. This guy might help you win one game. He might give you one big shot in the playoffs. That will be it. Remember all the buyout, the Greg Monroes and all these guys. And none of those guys have been oh, man, that guy came in and just literally, flipped the script, went nuts, helped the Celtics win 2 or 3 games. So what you can do is, you got to just decide if it's worth bringing a guy like Mills in, or do you convert Keita, or you say, okay, it's you've done a good this year, go to Summer League, will sign you another, and next year you really compete for a roster spot. Because I think they like what Luke Cornett has done, and now you got Tillman. So do you need a fourth bid, right? And they really haven't played Tillman much. And then if you have Jaden Springer, do you need Mills? If you're really looking for, but Springer's not a shooter much as a defender. So a lot of discussions, a lot of, or do you just use the spot, Warren, just for the hell of it because you just want to add a guy?
Right.
If he doesn't help you, like the Blake Griffin, and people go, well, Blake, I don't see Blake suddenly coming back. He might be working out. I think he's told the Celtics, if I come back, it will probably be in Boston. I'm not signing with the Clippers, and I'm not going to betray you. I retired, but I like it if I do come back. But you got to think about that. But to me, you've got to figure out what this guy will mean to you long term. Will he help you? And is he okay with not playing? Is Patty going to be okay with not playing much? I don't think Marcus Morris would have been, but I do think Marcus Morris would have played if he came here. I think he's sort of slowed a little bit, but I'm a big Marcus Morris guy. I like what he did when he was with the Celtics. I thought he was a dude that they really needed. Those teams was hit with our. With Jay Crowder and Isaiah, they had Marcus, they had some real dogs in that team. You want those dudes with you in a dark alley. But Warren, I think you should consider it because I think obviously Patty wants to play he won one in San Antonio. So name all the candidates: the Minnesotas, Oklahoma Cities, the Lakers, the Warriors, whatever, all the teams. Probably with championship caliber intentions. I don't think, some of these teams are probably going to look at them that are playing the Bulls or whatever, or the Hawks, or he just left the Hawks. Sorry. Some of these teams are vying, I think.
The Hawks thing is interesting considering the Trae Young news, even that they let him go, so kind of signals to me they're just like, they might be punting on this all together, man.
Totally. So. Yeah, I think in Atlanta, they just got to figure out what they're going to do this summer. They got to see what the Lakers will probably offer them for Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. They got to, if you're going to break them up, you got to break them up and figure out a future in Atlanta because Atlanta's just kind of on a merry-go-round. They're going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, true indeed. Well, that'll do it here for this week's edition of Believe in Celtics. Great conversation about the MVP race, the mind of an MVP voter, and Gary Washburn, who's had this vote here for over 10 years. So amazing conversation to have there. I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback on where you think Jayson Tatum lies in the MVP race. Let us know. Give us your thoughts here on Believe in Celtics. Again, as always, hit us up on X at Shot Sports NBA and my guy Gary G Washburn Globe. We'll catch you all next week, man. Big 5-game stretch here for the Celtics. So a lot can be made. A lot can be made in the way of Tatum's MVP race here, too. So stay tuned here. Believe in Celtics, y'all. We're out. Peace.